Okay, so hello, good morning. We are on webinar 2 from the AMPLIFY and TRANSMIXR series Beyond Reality and Immersive Tech series webinar. Today, we are focused on the, on the second webinar, Creative Futures, Ethical Frames, Balancing Innovation and Integrity Tech. So we already had the reimagined realities, and we will still be having one next week, opportunities beyond reality, exploring the new creative frontier. So for the creative future ethical frames, we will have the webinar recorded. We have a structure of short intros with our speakers, a panel discussion, and of course, a Q&A session that you can still, you can do it and you can put the questions in the chat. So starting from the beginning, I'm Cristiana Pérez. I'm part of the F6S team. I worked on TRANSMIXR project as a communication manager. And at F6S, we also manage the project AMPLIFY. So AMPLIFY is a project that is developing new digital tools powered by AI and XR, AMPLIFY Portable and AMPLIFY Immersive. The project aims to offer artists in the culture and creative industries free resources to explore the physical and digital interface, also known as phygital experiences. And for TRANSMIXR, we are reimagining the media landscape by using AI and XR technologies to turn the audience from passive viewers to active co-creators of media experiences. So our project aims to empower also the culture and creative sectors by building tools that truly respond to the needs of the creators. We are developing 4 pilots co-created with users, stakeholders to build real-world creative solutions. Our pilots are in new media, in arts, and in culture heritage. So now I will give the word to our speakers. So we will have 3 speakers today. Marie Hospital, that is a journalist at Agence France Presse. Trevor, that is the Director of Operations and HR with TG4. There is the Irish TV channel, and Katrien De Moor, that is Associate Professor at Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and is represented AMPLIFY. Marie and Trevor are representing TRANSMIXR. Can you talk a bit about yourselves? Katrien, can you start?
Sure, thanks a lot, and good morning, welcome. Thanks for joining this seminar, and thanks for the invitation also to be here. So a few words about my background. So I'm currently at the University of Science and Technology in Norway, and my background is really social sciences, but I'm in a technical department, so much of my day-to-day work is really tapping into some of the discussions that we will have today. My core interest is really in human-centered technology design, and I've been doing work on different types of technologies, but also looking at different aspects of it. How does it challenge methodologies we have? How do we work with this? But also, how does it challenge who we involve in these processes and so on? So how about underrepresented groups? How can we make sure that they are included? How can we break some of the power relations and the power asymmetries in these processes and so on? And my take into this, having worked on ethical challenges and issues in different kind of technological contexts, is really that much of the paradigm that we've had until now, focusing on improving people's experiences, has now come to a point where we see the negative consequences of that. So it's very good. We want to have XR experiences that are user-friendly, human-oriented, and so on. But we need to be much more careful about what cost we make people pay in a way to have those experiences be human-centered. So I hope what we can discuss today is really how can we bring in these critical and more nuanced perspectives and kind of be a driving force in pushing a paradigm shift so that some of these ethical aspects that we will discuss today don't just remain something on paper, some visions, some high-level principles, but that we also kind of really get a step further. And I think related to the topic, for me, a core question is not really about the why. Of course, the why is also very important, but it's especially also about the how. How can we make this transition happen? So in AMPLIFY, I'm leading the work on human-centered and ethical design of the technologies that we are working with. So we are doing a lot of work within the different pilots with the different communities and stakeholders involved. So and there are both like high level, but also in the day-to-day interactions, challenges and frictions and ethical aspects that pop up. And this is very interesting to learn from. So one of the questions there is how can we foster this ethical reflexivity, not only as individual partners in the project, but also as a team. And I think that's something that hopefully we can discuss a little bit further. So that's me.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, Katrien. Marie, can you present a bit about yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. So I'm Marie Hospital. I'm a journalist for Agence France Presse, which is one of the main international news agencies, along with Reuters and Associated Press. So I'm a video journalist, and I've been a video journalist for AFP for more than 20 years. And I joined for the last 3 years. I've been working for AFP in this project called TRANSMIXR, which is a Horizon EU-funded project on innovation. And the role of AFP in the project, we were in charge of the news use case. And the idea for us was to see how we could integrate AI and immersive technologies in our workflows, our journalists, as journalists, to help us be more efficient and also produce new types of contents to attract younger audiences and see what these technologies can bring us as journalists. And so what will be interesting in this webinar will be to discuss how we can use those technologies and still preserve like our values as journalists, and how we can do that in these challenging times. So that's all from me.
Thank you so much, Marie. Trevor, last but not least.
Very much, Christiana. So good morning, everybody. It's lovely to be with you this morning. So my name is Trevor Clochartaigh. I'm Director of Operations and HR with Clochartaigh. Clochartaigh is a national public broadcaster based in Ireland. I think we're probably the best little broadcaster in the world, if you ask me. We're very humble. So we are modelled on the Channel 4 model, which means we're a publisher broadcaster. So we're quite a small company, but we commission all of our content from independent production companies, which means we're quite agile and we're able to adapt quite quickly to whatever changes come along in the broadcasting sphere. So we're based in the west of Ireland in a very rural area. We're not like most broadcasters who are based in the capital city of the country, but we do broadcast nationally and internationally. We have a very good reputation for innovation and doing things differently. And our motto is Sulela, or a different perspective. So we try and take a different perspective on life. My own personal background is that I started off my professional life in theatre and drama. I then worked as a TV producer director, working for many years on a TV soap opera as a director and a producer. I was then involved in community development, and from there I was sucked into the world of politics and spent 7 years at national level in the Parliament. So I suppose I have an interest in the whole development of policy at a national and international level and an EU level, and how that does or doesn't work properly. So we might be able to discuss that a little bit later on. In my current role, I'm Director of Operations and HR. That also covers all the people elements of the job, but also access and accessibility, and also the DEI elements. And I think that's a really big consideration for us here today on the debate when we're talking about AI and emerging tech, is the representation we have of everybody and how people are considered when we're developing technology like this, so that we don't have inherent biases in the types of technology that we have. So from a TRANSMIXR perspective, similar to Marie, in most of these big European projects, there are use cases or kind of like pilots that we do. So Clochartaigh has been involved in a pilot around news broadcasting. So we've been trying to reimagine how you might potentially make live news in the future. And we've been we created a pilot where we had a virtual studio and a news bulletin that was live, which was broadcast in a VR headset for people to watch in a VR experience. And also they could watch it in a traditional 2D experience on a TV or a laptop. But also probably the most innovative side of it was that we actually produced the program in a VR control room. So there was no physical control room. The director and the editor were in VR headsets working together at the same time to produce the program, the news broadcast. So it's been a really interesting experience for us from a TG-CAHR perspective. It's something new that we've never done before. It's very innovative, and I think just the process of working together in these projects with other people and experts makes your head tired, because you do a lot of thinking, a lot of talking, a lot of pushing the boundaries and asking what if type of questions. So it's been a really wonderful experience. But AI and XR and VR are intrinsically linked to all of the project developments that we've had. So a lot of these questions and these discussions have been happening over the couple of years that we've been working together.
Thank you so much, Trevor. So this is the presentation of our speakers. I will just stop sharing my screen for a moment, and we will start with a question more directed to Katrien. Of course, you are more than welcome to weigh in, and any question in the chat from our participants, you can say. So considering this rapid deployment of technologies that we have been seeing in this era, like generative AI and immersive experiences, how can we define integrity in a digital product or a service? What is your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and it's kind of cutting immediately into the core topic of these discussions. And we could have long discussions on that, but I'll just share my view, and then Marie and Trevor can hopefully complete. But I would start from like, what is integrity, and how do we define integrity? And for me, that's about being consistently and honestly and truthfully following certain principles and ethical compass, ethical principles, and not making unacceptable compromises on those principles. And how do you guarantee that? How do you bring that into this picture? If we put it into the context of these rapidly developing technologies, and we are now focusing on XR and AI in particular, but of course there is a lot of integration of different types of technologies here. I think for me, it's really about how do we ensure that not only the way we design these technologies, these digital technologies, but also how they will function afterwards in society remains human-centered and is not only upholding those human-centered values that lie at the basis, but also like really contribute to them, strengthen them, reinforce them. So that on the one hand, making sure, as I mentioned, like how do we ensure the integrity of how these technologies are designed, but also how do we make sure that they actually have a positive impact on our societies and on the human condition in a way. So that comes with a number of consequences. So for starters, it requires us to think holistically and to have a broader perspective. It requires us to have a common understanding and a common vision of what kind of principles do we put at the core here, and that we design for them from the very beginning, but also that we have mechanisms in place to ensure that potential risks or harms that could violate these core values are anticipated, not only at the end, but throughout the whole process and also afterwards. So, and again, that has implications for defining strategies, how to deal with that. So I think this integrity is kind of strongly linked to the principles that we want to preserve, but not only preserve, we want to strengthen them, enforce them, reinforce them. So for me, that's kind of how I would define integrity in this context.
Trevor, on a perspective of a media company, this is different for your side, for your experience, or you relate to it?
Yeah, my experience, and we be a member of the European Broadcasting Union, and from talking to colleagues there, I think most broadcasters have kind of sat back a little bit to see what happens. I think what we've seen is that this whole drive has come initially from commercial interests. So it's really come from the big tech companies initially. And I think you have to ask what are the motivations behind the development of these technologies. So I think number one, it's been commercial. It's been to make money and to make profit. I think what we've seen then is coming close second are academics and people who are interested and curious around technology. And I think then maybe the public services and the states and the say the EU and the national states then are kind of coming behind, and we're seeing all of these technologies and developments are kind of trickling down from those levels now, so that we're seeing at all levels. At a national level, we have an AI strategy. We're now seeing AI task forces. We're seeing guidelines coming forward, and we're seeing people developing projects, and we're seeing investment being made in companies and in organizations that are developing technologies. But I think what's happened is that certainly the commercial interests are way out ahead at the moment. They've been doing most of the development. And I'd say a lot of the considerations, the ethical considerations that Katrien has mentioned there, weren't to the forefront of their minds when they were actually developing these technologies. So it's good to see that. I think the two guiding principles that the AU has said that we should abide by are trust and excellence. And I think trust is the big one for everybody. I think it's also really important to say that AI isn't one thing. It's not a homogeneous thing. AI has been around, it's existed. We're all using AI all the time. There's AI involved in the Zoom call. So AI is it's like salt on your dinner. It's part of everything that we do already. But it's how it's being used and how it's being developed is very questionable. And I know certainly in our sector, in the broadcasting sector and the creative and sector, there's huge concern about how, for example, these LLMs have been developed using content that's been created by people, and they've copyright on that content, and that's been scraped and it's been used to teach LLMs, etc. Pictures and content have been used to help drive image creating machines that are available. And the question is, if it's very like my pictures that I made it or I painted, how ethical is that? So I think there's a huge question about how these technologies are initially built, what core content is used to teach them, where was that given from, how is that being monitored? And I think at the moment is one of the reasons why I'm really happy to live in the EU, because I think at least we have some form of moral compass on these issues. I think there is a certain guidance, even though we would have hoped it would happen quicker. But I do think there's a good guidance coming from the EU. I think it's very much like the Wild West in other countries. And as somebody said to me recently, if you're buying a product that's AI driven, be careful, because there's a lot of sharks in the water. There's a lot of people who are trying to make a fast buck. There's a lot of people who say they know they're doing what they're doing, but they really don't, and they don't know the implications. So lots of questions there and lots of things to discuss, I'm sure, Christiana.
Agree, and Europe launched recently the AI Act, so it was a step forward. Even in some XR projects, there were some implications. I know that some, not implications per se, maybe not the best word, but some changes, because the AI Act affects all of us, but it's we feel more safe, maybe, at least people are thinking about it. Marie also put you on the spot on a perspective of a journalist. How do you feel that?
Well, Katrien and Trevor already said a lot, but from a perspective of a journalist, I would say that whatever tools we use, AI, immersive tools, I mean, the principles for a journalist are the same. Like we should always verify numbers, sources, contact experts, go on the ground, so whatever tools we use to produce our content, we should never forget those principles. And as long as we stick to those principles, then we'll get the trust of our readers, viewers. And so, in AFP, we're really cautious with all of this. I mean, we are using, and as you said, Trevor, we've been using AI already for many years. Like at AFP, we use translation, but we always verify what AI, proposes us. We also use AI to transcribe. Like I'm a video or journalist when you can use transcribers to transcribe your interview, you gain a lot of time, but then you always check what, that's the thing. For me, the rule is like for the human being, like the journalist, to always have the last word, to always be in control, and just use those tools as tools that can help us, but not replace us. Yeah. So that's how to, stay and preserve integrity for me.
Yeah, and makes sense. And I believe in both of our projects, TRANSMIXR and AMPLIFY. It's also something that we are working on and that we have been working, and we will continue to work. TRANSMIXR now is almost ending, but we did a job on that we try to preserve that integrity. Thank you so much. So now more related to you, Trevor, as a leader, right, in driving immersive and operation technology in a media organization. How does your team reconcile the pressure with this fast, innovative and deployment of new XR experiences or operational systems? There are some internal mechanisms, ethical friction. There was anything that you implemented to ensure this integrity, that is sacrifice the speed of the competitive edge? Because let's face it, we are always like going and learning, I believe. So how are you coping with this?
Yeah, I think we're still flying by the seat of our pants, if we're being honest. I think we're in an organization that loves to innovate, that there are people who are really, really curious and some brilliant minds in our organization, even though we're quite small. So we've been able to deploy some small AI tools. For example, one of our team, an engineer, developed a tool to help people making social media content to be able to do the subtitling of that content much more quickly in the right font and in the right graphic design, etc., which was an in-house development that was quite small, but really, really helpful and saved people a lot of time. So I think we've seen over the years in broadcasting, in television and film, we've seen lots of innovation. So I'm of an age where I remember when we used to have to use big Vita tapes when we were making TV programs. You used to record them in a big, heavy camera. You used to have to come back and you have to digitize everything, etc. And then all of a sudden, this amazing machine called an Avid came along, which was a digital editor, and you digitize your content and made things quickly. And I remember at the time, lots of people saying, "Oh, this is going to be the end of proper editing. People won't be able to edit properly because they won't understand the principles, etc." So we've always had innovation, and I think we're always looking to do things differently. For us, though, it's a little bit like what Katrien and Marie have said. It's about the end user. For us, it's about the audience. What does the audience want? And can these tools be deployed to help us make better content for the audience? Be that in a way, I think there's great potential, for example, for us to be able to repurpose content to make content more accessible for viewers. I think, of speeding up the process of making the content, getting rid of what we would call the drudge work. If there are faster ways to consolidate content, for example, to be able to search through content to find the pieces or the shots that you're looking for, or the people in certain footage that you would have, to find them more quickly so that you can then do the creative elements of putting the program together and creating a narrative that's interesting for the audience. I think when we use tools in that way, they're very, very useful. I'm skeptical around how creative AI can be. For me, it's interesting that I was at a conference recently in Dublin about gaming, and we'd imagine that gaming is to the fore really of the use of AI, especially in creating worlds and graphics and all this sound effects, etc. But there's been some research that came from Scotland, the University in Scotland recently, and what they did was they looked at, there were about 4,000 new games created for gamers last year, and they have to specify whether or not they've used AI technology in the development of their games. And I think 3,999 of them said yes, they had. But when the researchers actually looked into that, it really wasn't for any of the creative elements. It was only for some of the very computational elements of when people were, sending in chits and they wanted to ask questions or they had technical issues. They were using the AI to sort out the data, basically. They hadn't really used it in any major way to create visual images or anything like that. And a follow-up they then did was, okay, so if people are using AI to create images or content, how much time is it actually saving them? And the interesting thing was that they found that it was taking them 20% longer to actually create some of the stuff that they were making rather than speeding them up, because they were spending so much time trying to craft prompts, trying to figure out how to work the system, how to get the system to recreate the images they had in their heads, to recreate that in the content. So I thought that was quite interesting. So I think we can get carried away, and we're certainly being sold. There are a lot of snake oil traders out there trying to sell us amazing magic bullet solutions that are going to do everything for us. But when you actually sit down and try and use them, they don't. And so I think we need to see these things as a tool, and some amazing stuff is being done to help in medicine and in all kinds of spheres. But I do think we need to be cautious about how we use it, and the human has to be at the center of this. There needs to be human oversight and editorial control in the way we're using these tools. But certainly from an innovation perspective, we're up for using it. We want to use it, but we want to make sure that it's being done and that the tools we're using aren't exploiting other people or other creatives in particular in the way that they've been developed.
Exactly. Thank you, Trevor. Katrien, being person passionate about this user research and human-centered technology design, do you have anything else to add to this perspective of Trevor in this ethic friction that people are working to overcome, maybe?
Yeah, I guess it would be interesting to compare. Of course, I'm not in your world, so to understand. But I think one question for me would still be like, how do you ensure that these topics are on the agenda continuously? So like from a kind of academic point of view and in kind of these kind of research projects, I think that's where there is still a lot of work to do. To make sure that we actually have, as I said in the beginning, not just like the big visions and understanding we want to avoid harm and so on, but like how do you in the concrete day-to-day decisions make sure that you have this on the agenda? What kind of tools do you use for that? How is it embedded in your processes? Is it a common, is it a shared responsibility? Is it a dedicated responsibility? I think it would be interesting to hear, especially from the practitioners, a little bit of that. I think from the kind of academic research or EU project point of view, I think there's still a mentality that needs to grow more. There are more and more frameworks that are really designed and built to be used in practice. And I think that's really what we need, not just the theoretical frameworks and perspectives, but really concrete tools that can be used to make these decisions, to make sure that, you know, these ethical discussions take place. And I think, at least, as I said, from the research point of view, it's still kind of organized in silos. So we are making progress there, and I'm sure we are making progress in AMPLIFY. I think you're the same in TRANSMIXR. You had this on the agenda from the very beginning. But I think having those kind of processes and tools and like that help us to have these discussions continuously, to understand the potential implications, but also what is it that we are not seeing, that we are not anticipating? How can we increase the chance that, you know, we are actually having potential issues on the agenda, and having concrete tools for that, I think is one of the big ways forward here, and where, yeah, it would be interesting to hear a little bit more about that from a kind of practice perspective.
Okay, Mahi, do you have any different perspectives? So at AFP, that we had the pleasure also to meet. So it's a huge company, a press agency. You work in multiple locations, multiple times. Do you have a perspective different from the ones shared from our colleagues?
No, it's not very different, but it's just like at AFP, we now have like a whole team that is in charge of AI at AFP, and that is looking for new tools that could help us in our workflows, as I was saying before. But also like we now have AI ambassadors that are going, because it's such a big company with offices all around the world. Then we have AI ambassadors in the different offices that are training journalists, because journalists tend to be very cautious every time there is something new, because we have our own way, each wants to work, and when there's a new tool, it takes time, because we're always yeah, suspicious, and it's good, you know. Yeah, there is. I saw. I'm about what you said, Trevor, on the fact that yeah, there is a lot of hype around AI in the media and all that. But I saw a recent survey that was conducted by one IFRA, which is the world's largest trade organization for news publishers, and it showed that only half of the media, well, half of the media are just beginning to use AI. Yeah, and 1/3 are increasingly using it, but only 11% claim to have an advanced usage of AI. So you see, everybody is being cautious with all these tools. And for instance, in the TRANSMIXR project, the tools we developed, like we develop a newsroom AI toolbox, and the idea is to have one tool for each step of the journalist workflow. So we monitor the news. You know, you have to know where the news is happening, and if the news is happening, then you write, edit the news, and then you broadcast it. And so for each step we develop tools, and the principle was that for each tool, like the monitoring tool or the story pack editor tool, like it's always, as I said before, the journalist that is in control. Yeah. So and we always apply the same principles, the basic principle of journalism, to all these tools. And for instance, there is one tool also that we developed that is a video formatting tool. Initially, the tool would, you know, you put a video in the tool, you upload a video, and then it summarizes the video, and it can also verticalize the video. And what we insisted on is that if we, like, AI will propose a version, but then we can always re-edit what AI proposes. So if there is a missing shot, or if AI forgot, yeah, an important part of the video, then the journalist can re-edit the video, or yeah, change the framing if the framing is not good. And that's what, I mean, this is yeah, for me, the most important aspect of this, and the relation with the tools. They are tools. they you know, they remain tools, and we are in control. We are holding the tools. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose for me as well, these projects are actually a really good example of responsible AI in practice. Because within the context of these project partners, people ask these questions, and when we were developing the different solutions that we're working on, these considerations were taken on board as well. And I know, for example, so the news broadcast use case that we have, where we created this production gallery in a virtual headset, there was a spin-off as well of that, which was an IBC accelerator program. And for me, it showed a really, really good use, practical use of AI technologies, in that the spin-off has shown that you can automate an awful lot of the manual practices that would have taken quite a lot of time in a news context. So, for example, they had an IB accelerator project this year, which they demonstrated, where a producer in a live news situation hears about a breaking news story, and they used agentic AI. And what they did was they had a kind of an orchestrator or a conductor of the agentic AI in the middle, which is able to connect with other agentic AIs, which ran the graphics program, it ran the archive, it ran the rundown software for the program. So, and it was a voice activated solution, which was developed in conjunction with the TRANSMIXR partners. So basically, if I'm this director in the news gallery, and there's a breaking story coming from Porto in Lisbon about something that's just happened, I can give a voice prompt to the conductor and say, can you find me any footage of what's happening, or tell me what the story is? Can you write me a really quick synopsis of what it is? And put together basically a very short bulletin for me to look at, that we can drop into the rundown in 10 or 15 minutes time. And the proof of concept showed that they could do that. And it was all done by the one agent in the middle, talking to all the others, gathering the pieces together, presenting it to the editor, who could then review it and say yes or no, or make changes. For me, that was a really good use of time in a very fast-moving media world, where it you know, can take so much longer, or you might spend so much time searching or creating graphics, etc. So in one sense, that's a really good use of it. The corollary of that then is, I know my colleagues listening in TGCAR, and I see a few of them here on the call, will be saying, well, what's the implication of that for my job? I actually do that on a day-to-day basis. I'm the person who goes to the archive, finds these pieces, etc. So there are going to be changes, and these are real ethical considerations of replacing the human in the process to a certain extent, even though we say that we have to have a human in the loop to oversee the final version, but is it going to reduce the levels of human interaction in the processes of making the content in the first place? So these are big questions, and I think that's part of the real reaction to AI has been, oh, we don't want to go there because it's going to cause a lot of hassle with staff and unions, and what are the implications, etc., of all of this. So I think that's why I think broadcasters in particular have been moving more slowly towards this rather than jumping head on into these questions.
Okay, thank you so much for that perspective, Trevor. Actually, a bit related to that, but not so related, as journalism core function, and we are talking about media, and we are talking about Marie or Trevor, I think it, or maybe both of you said that we need to confirm our fonts, right? We live in an era of deep fakes. We can do a lot of things and make people that we don't know say a lot of things that aren't true. And as in journalism, so more directed to Marie in this case, we need to inform and maintain the public trust. So as emerging tech, these deep fakes and advanced synthetic media become more accessible, how can the media industry evolve to maintain these credibilities? So to maintain these current font that we can still trust the media companies, because, for example, in Portugal, we had an example of a media outlet giving a news slot in the night journal, in the night news moment, of a fake video that was a joke about some weather that happened, and they were sharing a fake video, and that was the news afterwards, because everyone knew that this was a joke video that a comedian has made. So how can the journalists maintain the credibility, maintain the work, having this ethical responsibility when covering and even utilizing these technologies? Where are the lines between reality and fabrication that combine, the blur between that lines?
Yeah. Well, at AFP, as I said before, we have an ethical charter that we follow, and the principles remain the same, whatever tools we use. But we also, for now nearly 10 years, we have a network of fact checkers all around the AFP network. So it's about 140 fact checkers in all our offices that every day verify, like debunk, we say debunk misinformation that is circulating around the social networks. And they do that in 26 different languages, because it's important to do that in the language where the misinformation is circulating. And so that's one way of fighting against this misinformation, is to immediately and as quickly as possible debunk it, to say, no, this is this is not true, and we explain why. And when we debunk it, we use, like, we call experts, we verify the sources, and if needed, we go on the ground to check that that photo wasn't taken where it is told to be taken, and it wasn't taken this year, it was taken that year. And we use AI tools actually to debunk. We also, like, we developed tools for journalists as part of EU funded project, just like TRANSMIXR and AMPLIFY. There is a tool that was developed by AFP and other partners that is called Verify, and We Verify, and so that are used by our network of journalists and by other journalists that can help. Like, if you have a classic misinformation is like, let's say there you have a earthquake somewhere, and people will start putting images of another earthquake. It's not at all the same earthquake, but then we have tools that help us, like, do reverse image search and prove that this image is not the Turkish earthquake, but the earthquake that happened in Haiti a few days ago. So yeah, so we use those tools, but also the traditional principles that an AFP journalist has. But what we do also is that so we have now these skills of verifying information, but we share this knowledge also. So like there are like digital courses that AFP has produced that are open for anyone, and you can follow those courses and learn yourself how to debunk misinformation and how and you could do exactly what our digital journalists do and learn how they do it through those courses. I can post the link later on if you want. And so to come back to TRANSMIXR and AMPLIFY, that's why all these EU project, and as you said, Trevor, and I think we're really lucky to be part, and that's where you see the force of the European Union, is that all these projects, like co-funded by the European Commission, the European Parliament, they help us like develop this kind of tools to fight against this misinformation tsunami.
And Christiana, we had a really similar example in Ireland in the last 2 weeks. So we had a presidential election, which was quite unusual in that we ended up only having 2 active candidates at the end. And about the night before the presidential election, a really convincing deepfake was sent out. It mimicked a news bulletin from our other national broadcaster, RTE. It used journalists who we see every night on our TV news programs. And it said that one of the candidates had pulled out of the race, and that she, for whatever reason, it was done at the last minute. It was very, very convincing and very hard to counteract. But a statement was put out very quickly that this had been proven to be a deep fake. But I think we need to be very worried about that. But one of the positive things I have seen again are what I believe are called C2PA workflows. So basically, these you might be familiar of the principle of provenance in the meat industry. So if you want to know if you're eating a lovely steak in Porto, for example, and you want to know where that steak came from, there's a whole chain of commands there that goes right back to the farm. So it's called farm to fork. That similar principle has now been taken on board in workflows for media. And I know this has been done through a number of EU projects as well. I've seen it one demonstrated where when a cameraman goes out with a camera or a phone or a camera person, there's a fingerprint put on the footage, which will say what the camera was, where it was, how it was shot, etc. It will then go through the editing system, which will put a similar fingerprint about the editing, the graphics. If graphics are used, that they're all fingerprinted all the way along. And at the end then, when you're a viewer sitting at home viewing that footage, there's a little icon in the top of your screen. If you click the icon, it will show you all the background of the piece that was edited. It's similar to going to your butcher's and seeing which farm and which animal your steak came from. So I think that's really, really important. And I think that type of standardization, or that type of of putting a proper mark of excellence, or a mark of recognition of where the footage has come from and that it can be trusted, is going to be really, really important going forward. So the principle would be, don't trust any footage unless you see that brand on it. And I think that's going to be key to gaining trust, particularly in the news and current affairs spheres, and in all of life, that if we want to trust anything, we're going to have to see a mark like that so that we know we can trust it.
Makes sense. Katrien, I see that you are nodding when Trevor is speaking. Do you have anything to add also with your experience in digital ethicals?
Yeah, I think this was very interesting to hear, and these concrete examples. So when you asked the question, I was also thinking of something that we have been kind of really concerned about. And again, coming from my perspective, is not only, for media, for content that is going through this rigorous process, but like, how can we empower people, to gain those critical digital competences, to be able to have a reflexivity around that as well. So I think the example you gave, Marie, sounds really interesting. So I would be very interested in getting that link, because I think it's this responsibility, and it's really nice to hear these concrete examples of how this responsibility is taken up. But I think a huge challenge there is also really to empower people, to give them the tools, give them the understanding of what is at stake, really. And how can we, as citizens, as users, as consumers, also play a much more active role than we do today. And I think it's really nice to hear that there is already that sense of taking up that responsibility as well, to help to educate people to gain those competences.
That's true, and I feel, in the perspective of a non-technical person, that I was born without the internet and with the internet, so I was born without it and without cell phones and everything. And for us, it's, at least for my generation, it was a development, so we are very used, but we are not natives, right? But I feel that maybe for my parents, they still have some difficulty on using some technology, so even understanding deep fake. So I think maybe the new generation will be more aware, and maybe more aware of that, let's call it watermark that you were mentioned, Trevor, to understand the path. But maybe the older generation will be more confused, and we see more and more that they share a lot on maybe social media, things that aren't correct because they are not aware. So I agree that. And I also am very interested in having your link, Marie. Please share it to me, and even with the chat, I will share with everyone.
But Christiana, just on that, there's something that's really interesting that we've found from talking to different generations about their the use of AI technology. So there's two elements really. One is that it's democratizing the use of the technology, because these tools and the types of things we're developing, say in TRANSMIXR, is going to make TV production and broadcast production, content production, a lot easier for more people, so more people can get to tell their stories who wouldn't have been able to do so previously because they couldn't afford to have a TV studio. But the other side is that a lot of younger people are railing against the use of AI because of the environmental impacts. They are really concerned about how much data is being processed, the big data farms around the world that are doing this, and the impact that's having on the environment. And that although we might see, putting a tweet in, or putting a prompt into a ChatGPT and asking questions seems like something very simple, I think younger people are much more aware of the impact of all of that. And we're finding from talking to some of our own younger cohort that they're really concerned about that, and they're pushing back against the use of these tools. So I think that's a really interesting question as well. And I think the other element then is the whole area of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and how can we ensure that we're including people. So I do think AI allows us to include more people in the conversation, but there are inherent biases in a lot of the tools that we're using. And a lot of younger people who are questioning the ethics of AI are asking these types of questions as well around the DEI implications.
Yeah, I agree. So a bit more general now, and because we are almost reaching the end, and I see that we have some questions in the chat. So quickly, so we can have time to the discussion in the chat. Emerging technologies are not only changing these ethical frameworks, as we have been talking, but also redefine the creativity and labor. And I think this is also something that people are worried about, right? So how can we ensure that we drive for efficiency and innovation, but we don't exacerbate the existing society biases or devalue of the human creative work? So where the line is it? And I think TRANSMIXR is a great example of this, but I will give you the floor. I'm not sure if anyone wants to start.
Yeah, I suppose for us, one of the interesting elements we've seen is that most of the AI tools are based on the English language. We work in Irish, which is a smaller, lesser spoken language, but I know all of the other languages around the world are trying to catch up. So we're also involved in another project called LLMs for EU, which is a huge European project, which is trying to help all of the LLMs catch up with the English language. So I think what we have is that the technology that's been developed to date is very much skewed towards white, middle-class, English-speaking Western society. So I think a lot of the work that needs to be done is to make the technology more diverse from the way it's been developed and the types of pools of data that it's pulling from. So I think there's a lot of work to be done there. So we're doing that from an Irish language perspective because it's important to us to reflect the particular culture the linguistic elements that we have, etc., in any tools that we would be using. But that goes across all kinds of, when you look at the implications of that it's white, middle class, Western culture that's really driving these algorithms in particular. We need to ensure, from a DEI perspective, that we look at the whole area of LGBTQ, that we look at gender balance, that we look at racial and ethnic profiling that can be done using some of these LLMs. And we know that it can be used for good, but it can also be used for things that are not so good. So I think these things are really important. And I think that's where we do need, at a European and an at that international level, we do need the likes of the EU to lead the way, because we're very much down the production chain when it comes to actually implementing solutions.
I can quickly shoot in here. So I'll try to keep it short. So I think from like my perspective, coming from more kind of the research world, one observation is that the discourse around these technologies is still very much like technologically deterministic and technology driven. And I think what we see not only in Norway, but also in other countries in Europe and also around the world, is that certain disciplines are really underfunded. So I think here it's absolutely crucial to reinforce the role of the humanities and the social sciences. And again, I'm coming from the research perspective here, but to really engage those disciplines and traditions that are looking at, for example, scholarship on inequalities today and so on, and bring them into these projects and making sure that that all of these aspects are considered and that they are not, again, just a minor thought where the narrative is still about the positivistic perspective on what the technology can create and how it can create more effective workflows and whatever. So I think bringing in those competences and reinforcing the role that humanities and social sciences play in our societies, not only to understand where the risks lie, but also really to form the future of these technologies, to form the vision of where we are going here, is absolutely essential. And I think, speaking for the Norwegian context, I think the numbers there are quite clear. They need to fight for their survival. And of course, with the whole boom in the AI field, this is again reinforced. So there are now, for example, in Norway, but I know also, for example, in Belgium, where I'm from, there are kind of bigger funding sources to have like multidisciplinary consortia, huge projects looking at different aspects. And I think we should really not underestimate how important it is to bring in those voices to, for example, look at DEI perspectives and so on. So making these meet and breaking that narrative, that discourse that is still very much kind of focused on the opportunities and the potential that lies in these technologies, and really giving room to understanding the social consequences, the political consequences of the wide-scaled uptake of these technologies I think is super important.
Thank you. Marie, do you have anything to add? No? Okay, so I see that in the chat we have our questions, and because we are ending, and one of the questions is related to, like, I think we can close it with it. I will read the questions in the chat and please weigh in. So I have a question, but not to any of the speakers in particular. So what is the best way for technologists, and creatives and ethicists to truly work together in a way that ethics become a part of the creation and not afterthoughts?
Well, I can share my 2 points here, because I'm also sitting here not only as a researcher, but also as a teacher, as an educator. And I think what is really essential as a starting point is to make sure that technology developers understand that they are really playing an important role. That what I face a lot in when we are interacting with students, whether they are computer science or other engineering, technology-oriented studies, is that they feel like, yeah, but the ethical aspects, that's not on my plate. So we are, for example, here at NTNU, we're in a process of a complete revision of future technology studies? What kind of insights, competences, knowledge should the future generation is going to design these technologies have? And ethics is one of the broad domains that is brought much more prominently into the curriculum. So I think it starts there. It starts with giving people a language, giving them a vocabulary, giving them insights into the tools, including them into the discussions early on. So I think education is a really important part of it, but especially also, as I said in the beginning, to avoid that there is this idea that probably there is some work package taking care of this. No, this is a shared responsibility, and it's only by having these discussions together that we can actually really understand the consequences and what needs to be done and so on, and where there are certain risks that need to be monitored. So I think, having that focus in education, providing room for this, making room for this, and also this understanding that this ethical reflexivity should be on the agenda the whole time. It's not something that, okay, now we have delivered our ethical deliverable, or we have our ethical approval in the box and now we're done. That's not how it works. So it's really about bringing this into the practice. And I think that's going to require, to some extent, a culture change. And I think if we work on this from different point of view, so partly the education, but also having the concrete tools, having the good instruments that foster these needed discussions about ethical aspects and values, and having these approaches which allow us to not have this as a black and white discussion. It's not about, is it good or bad? It's about understanding in which context and how can it be ethical. So that requires us to have these more concrete discussions and concrete use cases. So those were a couple of points, at least. I guess the others have more to add.
Do you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's quite similar in a way. It's about acting responsibly at all levels. So I think we as individuals have to take responsibility for the tools we use and how we use them. But then I think we also have to be cognizant that the companies who are creating the tools have to act responsibly, and they need to be guided to act responsibly by government and by institutions that are in charge of making the policies on these issues. So I think acting responsibly at all those levels will help. But I do think all of this starts with creativity. I think it goes back to the human. I don't see AI as being creative per se. I see it as a tool. I think if you're trying to create something new, something different, something interesting, you're going to need the human element involved in that. And we as human beings shouldn't abdicate our own creative responsibility to ChatGPT or something else. So, for example, a scriptwriter shouldn't be putting a prompt in to say, write me a script about blah, 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 and churning out whatever it gives back. I think we need to keep our own brains working creatively. We need to make sure we're still involved in that creative process. And I think we've seen examples of that even in our own project TRANSMIXR, of two other elements around cultural institutions and the performing arts, where we've seen brilliant uses of AI and this technology in creative ways and new ways of presenting content, etc. But they came from the human behind the idea. The humans had the idea about being creative, how this could be different. We need to hold on to that, because that's our unique selling point. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us different to the AI. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and that makes me think of one expert that we interviewed at the very start of the TRANSMIXR project, that said that with all the misinformation, the more elaborate misinformation that will be generated by AI, at some point, I mean, the only person that you will be able to trust is the journalist on the ground. And so they anticipate that the new technologies will re-establish like very traditional forms of journalism, going and to interview people on the ground, and you will be able to prove that you did it as a journalist, you interviewed you. So yeah, I think that's very, I like that analysis. So and this is what we're trying to do at AFP also.
Thank you. We also have another question. I think it's related to the part of the ethical friction that we talked. So the question is, and I think you already answered a bit of it as well. So is there a dedicated role or committee that you rely on a model where every developer, engineer is trained and empowered to introduce that ethical friction point in the development cycle? So we don't work only in media, right? We also have engineers, we also have developers working on that. Does anyone have an opinion on this, or at least a thought that we could maybe improve, share with the public?
Yeah, I know in Ireland at least, so we had the AI Act from the EU, so that's trickling down through the national institutions where we're getting national AI policies. There's a national AI leadership forum in Ireland, which is looking at questions like this, and it's setting up a think tank and a governing body to oversee the AI development that's going to look at all industries. And we've been given guidelines as well for public sector bodies in Ireland have ethical guidelines and guidelines around AI that we are to follow. So following from that will be the follow-up. The regulators will be following up and checking that we're doing that. So I'd imagine that's going to happen for all industries. And again, it's part of the lag of, the policymakers trying to catch up again with industry and the commercial interests that have already gone ahead.
I think the question that is below, it's also a bit related to this. So Sarah is saying there is a new EU project, and we talked about European projects a lot in this webinar, called Verity, that is exactly about misinformation. And they have 8 stewards of trust defined. Do you think that for you these figures exist? So, and if yes, who are these stewards on your role? Scientists, journalists, researchers?
I think that's the project Marie mentioned, is it? Verify?
No, it's not
Verity. This one is Verity.
It's another
yeah.
one. Yeah. I'm not sure I understand this with the stewards of trust.
I would say that maybe they have some lines that guidelines. Sarah, if you are still here, can you give us a bit more context? Sarah raised the hand. Let me find Sarah here.
But otherwise, I mean, I think it's the responsibility of every actor there, scientists, journalists, researchers, to make sure that what we do, what we say, is ethical, has integrity, and can be trusted by our viewers, readers, and so it's our responsibility individually to for each of us to respect that.
But also, Marie, what's happening as well at a corporate level, and I would see this from my HR colleagues, is that most companies now are appointing chief technology officers as the AI lead, maybe, or every company is being appointing an AI lead or a committee that's overseeing these things. Mm-hmm. And every company has corporate social responsibility reporting that they have to do, regulatory mm-hmm. reporting, and AI is being increasingly added into the list of risks. It's being added into the list of responsibilities. So any companies as such are now having to report on what they're doing with AI, etc. And I think we're going to see more and more of that as the legislation works its way down through the system as well, that there's going to be somebody responsible in every organization. Each department's going to have its own guidelines around it. And then there will be follow-up regarding to check that that's all being adhered to by the regulators of the different sectors that we all work in.
But is there a way to know on who should we trust?
I think is that a lot of it, from a broadcasting perspective, certainly public service media is finding it's a new role, and a lot of agencies such as Agence France Presse and those that have been around a very long time who've based their reputation around the trust of what they do. Certainly we're seeing a renaissance, I think, in the trust in public service media, because people know brands like TG4 and so the other EBU members have been around a long time. We're funded publicly, and we abide by the core principles of public service and providing a service and having true and honest coverage of the events that are happening. So I think that's really important, and it's supporting the work that has been done over the years, rather than other actors in that space. But we shouldn't fool ourselves that people are moving away from public service media as well and finding content across all kinds of social media, through podcasts, through other sources that really can't be relied upon. And I think the whole area of media literacy as well, and Katrien kind of mentioned this earlier about educating people to realize where they're buying their food from. For me, it's going back to the steak analogy. You know, if you want to buy a burger from a very dodgy vendor and you just don't know what ingredients are in it, good luck. But if you want to really know that you're eating quality food, you need to make sure you know where it's coming from.
Yes, and there are also, I mean, we're talking about AMPLIFY, TRANSMIXR, which are innovation projects, but there are also EU projects around collaborative, like public service media that are collaborating all together to share their content. And I will post also on the chat, there's plenty of projects to educate also the European citizens on, you know, which media you can trust in Europe. And so there's one project called A European Perspective that EBU is leading, and another one is that we just launched is called Chat Europe. It's a website with all about EU affairs, and we are using AI technology. There is a chatbot, but the idea is that you can ask any question you want on EU news affairs, but it will only the answers that it will produce are produced on the basis of reliable data from the partner media partners, which are ANSA, DPA, AFP, Deutsche Welle. So yeah, it's Europe Public Service Media that is sharing their content and putting it out there available for everyone. So it's, yeah, part of educating, as you said, Katrien.
So we have the educating part, and reaching the end, one final question that I also think is related with a question from Carla. So what is your final thoughts on how we can cultivate a creative future that is both technological, advanced, but also deeply human-centered? So the question from Carla is also, what is this hardest trade-off on facing the technology, but also maintaining the integrity with the human? So final thoughts on this, or even advice for the future?
I guess like a short summary of some of the things, at least that from my point of view, kind of play in here, and many of them have been mentioned. It's about well, there is one that we haven't really discussed so much, even though Trevor mentioned it in his in the beginning, that having incentives to design technology in a human-centered way. I mean, we didn't talk about surveillance capitalism and how this whole paradigm of monetizing on people's experiences and so on is really a super important point in this, or a super important angle, because as long as you don't have the incentives, the vision might be there at a high level, but in the end, if what is driving the innovation is the profitability, then we don't solve the problem. We can have good tools, we can have educate the future developers to care about these things and so on, to have the know-how how to have these discussions. But so I think it's also about creating incentives. So and this is where probably governments can play an important role to kind of push this even further. And we need to think about, similarly as there has been, or there is a lot of discussion on how can we have sustainable business models? How can we bring sustainability into how business is done? It's the same here. How can we create incentives for really driving humane, human-centered technology design? And then all of these other things that we discussed, having the frameworks that really allow to integrate this into practice, also having the support, having funding projects like these that are really trying to do this in a meaningful way. And at the end also value these outcomes, even though they might not make the big jumps in terms of technological progress or innovation. They might come with concrete contributions to how you can actually make these different speeds meet, make these different objectives meet, and cultivate these good examples and so on. So yeah, I think most of these things, they go very closely together, and it's not one thing that will drive this further, but I think it's a combination of responsibilities and actions that are needed at different levels.
Final thoughts, Trevor?
For me, when we're creating trying to culture a creative future, it starts with creativity. So for me, that starts with the human, but it also should end with the human. So I think really it's about encouraging people to stay creative, to use their own minds, to develop great ideas. But I would see there are some amazing tools. There's some amazing stuff is happening. There are amazing advancements happening because of AI and how that can help save in the healthcare. It stands out for me that some of the developments that are trying to find cures for certain cancers, etc., is really being accelerated by the use of AI, which is wonderful, I think. If it can reduce waiting times for somebody who's being diagnosed with something, because it can scan their x-rays much more faster and spot maybe anomalies in an x-ray which a human eye might miss, I think that's all wonderful. But I think you do then need the editorial role of the human in the loop as well, at the end of the loop in particular, to assess the impact not only creatively of the content on people, but the ethics as well of how has this been made, who made it, where did it come from. If I do release this to the world, what's the potential impact of it? Why have people made what they've made? Is it inclusive, etc.? So I think the human to start the creative process, come up with the ideas, and then the human at the end to act as a kind of a gatekeeper to make sure that all the proper guardrails have been in place and all the proper ethical guidelines have been followed. But I'm positive about it. I think we can do amazing things with it. I think we're doing it through the projects that we're working on. But I see it as a tool, a really useful tool. And I hope we can continue to innovate and to develop and to use it for the betterment of mankind.
Marie, final thoughts?
Yeah, as Trevor, I want to be optimistic, and I think that yeah, it's like a new tool. We're learning, how to use them, but I'm quite sure that the Gen Z, like my kids, they are already, as you said, Trevor, they know about this. You shouldn't use ChatGPT too much because yeah, this uses a lot of energy. They're really conscious of all that, and I think that they will find a way to live with it and to take the positive out of it. And also I already see the culture of fact checking. I don't know if it's because they have a journalist as a mother, but they hear it at school all the time, like misinformation, the fact checking. And so yeah, it's growing in the education. It's more and more present, and they have this conscious that maybe we didn't have, like when we weren't exposed also to all of this. But I think we have to be optimistic there.
Okay, so thank you so much for this insightful discussion. I also think that we should be optimistic, and it's important that we are seeing more and more fact checks, as you were saying. I totally agree, Trevor, that the humans need to continue to read and to feed the creativity. So because the machines, and we know that because, for example, ChatGPT always writes the same way, right? So we need to put ourselves, and it's not like a war against the machine at all. We are projects that work these and are trying to cross both worlds, and it's possible to cross it in an excellent way. So thank you so much for the discussions. You were fantastic speakers. I want to thank you very much for the questions as well on the chat. I want to remind you that we still have another webinar. It's called Next Beyond Opportunities Beyond Reality in this case. And I will add the link in the chat. So it's next week. So please join to hear more about our discussions. And you can also follow our job on TRANSMIXR and AMPLIFY on our social media networks and website. And we are looking forward to see you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.